Welcome to another episode of Kasper On BI. I'm pretty excited about today. Today we're going to talk about everything Excel with MrExcel, also known as Jelen, who is of course one of the most famous instructors, MVPs, people who know everything about Excel. So we're going to learn from him, learn some history, learn some Power BI versus Excel and collaboration and what is going on in the Excel world, because I'm also guilty of that. I have not been paying attention that much to it. So with that, let's go to the episode. Bill, I am really honored to have you here and to see you. It's been so long.
So long.
Yeah, great to have you here.
How you been? It's great to be here.
Yeah. How have you been?
Things are good. Things are really good. We're down here on the East Coast of Florida. I'm not traveling doing seminars anymore, but so it's kind of a nice half day routine, pretty much. It works out great.
That's really good. It's now some winter time, right? So now you can actually go outside.
That's right. Yeah. When I lived up north, it was 3 months a year you could be outside. Now those are the 3 months a year where you don't want to be outside.
Yeah.
The rest of the year. So that's good.
Yeah, I can imagine. Okay, so I mean, you are MrExcel, so a lot of people already know you, but still, we are talking to some data people and Power BI, and so maybe you can do a little bit of introduction.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So I started using first Lotus 1-2-3, and then Excel. Back in the 90s, and at the company I was working for, I was the go-to guy. If anyone had any Excel questions, they would come to me. And at some point around 1998, I started the website MrExcel, publishing. My goal was just to publish an article a week, right? And I said, hey, send me your Excel questions. I'll send you the answer. And then the best question will become the article of the week. And so every week there was a new Excel article that was being posted, right? It was good. But then it started to get a little bit popular. Like one of the search engines had us in the top 10. And, now there's more questions coming in than I can answer. And so I launched the forum, the MrExcel message board, and that allowed other people, who were just bored at work, needed to kill some time and didn't want to play Minesweeper, right? They'd come out and answer a few Excel questions a day. And wow, it's really grown. We have like 1 million questions asked and answered at the site. So, it's a great resource. Even if I run into a problem in Excel, I'll go out and post a question because someone there, that community, someone will know, right?
I know. I mean, from seeing you guys at the MVP Summit, it is a pretty tight-knit community that has been around forever, right? There are some of the MVPs that have been around like since the 80s or 90s or...
Yeah, right. Like, yeah. I mean, they remember like when there was an MVP program and then it was cut for a week or something like that, and they're back, So, I mean, the people that have the 20-year disc and 25-year disc, which is just amazing, right? So,
yeah. I mean, Excel has been around forever. So always data for you?
Yeah. Well, so it's funny. I have these two roles. When I actually worked for a living, I was dealing with data all the time. My joke is I was using Excel 40 hours a week, and those were the weeks I was on vacation, right? So I was just always living in Excel. But now that I'm writing and publishing books, I have this other hat. So this computer over here is the Excel computer, but over there I'm using Adobe InDesign. I try and publish 3 books twice a year. And so when I'm in book mode, all of a sudden, I switch from Excel and now I'm doing layout and indexing and all kinds of things in Adobe InDesign. I'm still better at Excel than I am at InDesign. I wish I was as good at InDesign as I am in Excel, because I'm sure I'm not doing things the most efficient way sometimes.
But that's okay. I mean, so how many books have you been published?
That's a question I don't know the answer to. There has to be over 100 books. I know that I've written 68. And then just thinking about all the other books that I published for other MVPs, we're up over 100 for sure.
Pretty nice. And people can go to MrExcel.com and look at all the books?
Yeah. In the top right-hand corner, there'll be a book there. Click on that book and then you'll get to all the books. So they're all there. Although let's just be honest, Amazon is, they now rule the world, right? I mean, Amazon can get you a book faster than I can get you a book, unless you're going to buy a PDF from me. But if you're looking for a physical book, Amazon can get it around the world faster than I can.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. So,
Right.
so why Excel? Why
Why
what?
Excel?
Yeah, why the love for the
Yeah.
spreadsheet?
Yeah. So you can do anything in Excel. I started out as a traditional programmer, right? COBOL and Fortran and things
Mm.
like that, creating reports for people. But the beautiful thing about Excel is Excel can be used to do anything. And I had one early client who I worked for several years. And, at some point I said to him, I said, this really should be an Access. And he's like, oh, no, 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 no. Right. Excel, he says, is transparent. I can go look at any cell and see what that formula is and understand how it's working. But to me, Access or SQL Server or whatever is like this black box. I don't know what's going on. And so, the Excel grid itself, I'm not talking about VBA, just the Excel grid. I mean, it's really a programming language. You
Yeah,
can
yeah.
you can just build some incredible models in there from any industry. I've seen people design quilts in Excel. I've seen people design flight simulators, like actually to train
Yeah, yeah,
pilots how to
video
fly.
games.
No, not even a video game. This guy is actually training real live pilots how to fly using an Excel spreadsheet.
You know what the funniest thing about Excel? Sometimes on Twitter, you see some guy in like Japan or somewhere. He made some amazing thing in Excel. Like who? First of all, who
Right.
is this guy? Like no one I've ever heard of
I
him
know.
before. But he made something
Yeah.
mind-bogglingly amazing.
Right. And then
Thanks.
who was it? Which team? I'm going to get it wrong. It was in the English Premier League. I think it was it Newcastle. They have managed to use an Excel spreadsheet to design their stadium displays. So people hold up these colored foils, right? So like you're using Excel spreadsheet to design a stadium-sized artwork, which is just amazing, right? So from the smallest, tiniest thing to stadium size, all done in Excel. I love the stories of all the things that people can do in Excel.
Yeah, definitely. It's quite interesting to see. Like my kid is now in like middle school. Like I would expect. No, I would expect them to get more Excel because
Yeah,
as soon as you start
right.
working, everyone like especially like a desk job, you
Yeah.
can't get out of Excel. Like it doesn't exist.
I know.
So
And it's funny. I'm laughing because when my kids were in middle school, I started to introduce them to Excel, some functions that people hardly ever use, but were perfect for 7th grade math, which was the least common multiple and greatest common denominator. So the GCD and LCM. I'm like, hey, you got this homework. We can make this homework go away in 60 seconds using Excel, right? Which was a great Excel lesson. But then when it got time for the test, they didn't know how to actually do it by hand. So dad got in trouble on that one. It's like, okay, I wasn't thinking ahead. Yeah, but it's funny. They don't get enough Excel. Maybe they get 4 weeks of Excel, part of a computer applications, yeah, it's frustrating because they're going to be living a lot of times they're going to be living in Excel at some point in their career.
Exactly. So, and I think one of the funnest things that I've seen in the last year probably is you working with ESPN. Like, how did that happen, and what are you doing there?
Yeah, I know. So this is so crazy that the Excel World Championships were actually televised on ESPN, and there's a joke that I make. I often do an 8-hour seminar, and somewhere around 9:45 in the morning, I get to this point, and I say, all right, there's 3 ways to solve this problem. I understand this first way, this very complicated 5-stroke way, 5-click way to solve the problem. And I don't want you to learn that, right? I understand it's there. And I always ask for show of hands, who are the people that can do these 5 steps? I show the 5 steps. And in a room of 100, there'll be 1 or 2 every time. Know that. And my joke is, okay, this is great. What's your name? What's your name? I'm working on getting Excel to be a sport in the Olympics, right? And you have to pause because the whole room is going to laugh. And, and then I say, you 2 are going to be on our national team because you're faster than everyone else in this room. And then I go on to show them the fast way to solve that problem. So I've been making this joke about Excel being a sport in the Olympics for so long. When they actually managed to get this televised on ESPN, and just to be completely fair, our entry to ESPN was on one specific day, going back to a movie from 2005 that was very popular here called Dodgeball. It was this ridiculous movie about a competitive dodgeball league that couldn't make it to ESPN, but made it to a fictional ESPN 8. There is no ESPN 8, but in the movie, it was ESPN 8, the Ocho. And, ESPN, they get the joke. And, I don't know, 6-7 years ago, they started showing on August 8th. So 8/8, they show what they call seldom seen sports. It was just a few hours the first time, but now they have an entire 24-hour program of these crazy sports that you don't see anywhere else. And the people playing those sports are taking them seriously. Like I was watching leading up to our ESPN thing, and there was something called fling golf, where you don't hit the ball with the golf head, but you throw it overhead using this special golf club, and corgi dog races, all kinds of just crazy sports. But you look at this and like, okay, these people are seriously into this. Just like I'm sure all of the other people looked at the Excel competition and thought, what is this? I've never seen anything like this with these 8 people competing head to head in Excel. Yeah. But it's weirdly entertaining. Like even my wife, who doesn't use Excel, was able to get it, right? She was like, wow, look at this guy, right? Or that wasn't an upset there or something like that. So it was pretty amazing, and I really enjoyed it just because I've been making this joke about Excel being a sport in the Olympics. I was like, this is big time, And then so it's ESPN 8 is on August 8th, but just last week I was watching college football, American football, and like the game was over and they must have had time to fill, and all of a sudden I'm on ESPN commenting on the Excel championships, right? So we're getting some replays.
Oh, that's pretty nice.
It's delightful in a very funny, kind of amazing way,
Well, I mean, if you're on after college football, how many people in the US would have seen you? Like 60 million or something?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question, and I'm sure a lot of them are like, "What the heck is this?" and tuned away to some other game. But for some people, the people who are just using Excel, 20, 30, 40 hours a week, like, oh my gosh, I know this, right? Like, let's watch the crazy things they try and do.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then, so another thing you do, I even before I joined Microsoft, you were already doing Excel and Excel courses.
Oh yeah, right.
How many courses did you do over the years?
So I kind of settled into this beautiful little 35 days a year, 35 courses a year. And it's funny, the people that come to my courses are mostly accountants, but they're not CPEs or CPAs. They're accountants working for big companies, and it worked out perfectly that they have this beautiful cadence to their work life, and that the first 15 days of the month, they're just busier than you can believe trying to close last month's books. But then the third week, like week 3 and week 4, it slows down. And so I would show up in a city, in the third or fourth week, and, you'd get 100 people from various companies in town to show up. At first, I thought, wow, this is great. They're coming to see me time, year after year after year. But then I realized, so you're an accountant making $100,000 a year. In order to renew your license, you have to get 24 hours of education each year. It's mandated by the state accountancy board, right? So even in downtimes, you're not going to let your license slip because you have to go to work, right? And my Excel session is more interesting than a tax update or whatever those other people are doing. So it was good. I would have good crowds. So I think for 17 years, I was doing about 35 dates a year. And I loved, like, from 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. that day. I loved doing those sessions because you would learn so much from people in the session. Like, someone would have discovered some weird thing that I'd never seen in Excel. And I always carried a little prize, a little 50-cent prize, just to make a big thing about it. We're like, here's this person, 750 million people using Excel, and here's this person in Oklahoma City who discovered some weird thing that I've never seen before. And that happened every single seminar. There was never a seminar where I didn't learn something new.
Wow.
And, I was as delighted as everyone else to discover that there's some weird thing in Excel that somehow this guy accidentally discovered, So it was always great seeing the new things. Then I'd come home from the seminar and I'd make some YouTube videos, right? And then when it came time to update the books, it was perfect. I'd just go back through the last year of YouTube videos and say, oh yeah, here, this, needs to make it into the book, right? So it was just this beautiful, synergistic, do the courses. People would have fun, I would have fun, but then you learn more things, and it just helps to create the next book.
So is there also something like in Excel, like in Power BI world, there's a lot of, or in data world, there's a lot of consulting too. Does that exist?
Yes.
Yeah,
it does. It does. And it's funny, when I started out, that was my first gig. I was doing consulting. And, so it was a situation where we had the website where you can come get your answer for free. But if it was too complicated, you would hire me, and you're hiring me for, I don't know, $100 or $200 or $250 to solve your problem. And it was a friend of mine who I ran into at a marketing session, even a tailor. Even says, look, you have a problem. You have 2 price points. You have free and $250. And if you offered something in the middle, right, just give people a chance to hand you $20. Create something that they would, you'll be amazed at how many people will be happy to give you $20. So I wrote the first book. That was back in 2002. Put that up, and within 18 months, the book sales were outpacing consulting, like 2 to 1. I'm like, oh, this is great, because with consulting, the thing that would frustrate me is you would build an application for someone, and it would be working great, and then 6 months later they would call you and say, hey, your thing doesn't work anymore. What do you mean it doesn't work anymore? Well, yes, Joanne left, and no one here knows how to use it. Right. But when you sell a book, no one ever calls you. No one ever calls you in the middle of the night and says, hey, the book won't open. Like there's no tech support after the fact for a book. So it was just easier to do books than consulting.
So what is Excel like? You actually would build like an application or a spreadsheet or?
Right. Yeah. Maybe for me, I suppose 90% of the time it had some VBA. So they're like, we're getting this data from the system, right? And our IT department says they don't have time to change the data the way we need it.
Yeah.
Right. So here's the ugly data coming in. And today, of course, we would do this all with Power Query, right? But back then we didn't have Power Query. So here's your ugly data coming in. Let's bring it in, get rid of the extra stuff, maybe filter, maybe pivot, maybe create a chart, and you press this button and now you have your report, right? And people were just thrilled because it was easier to come to me and spend a couple $100 than to go to their IT department and try and get on the schedule. And like, why is it in the old style IT department, any request you sent in, I can tell you that the time estimate coming back was either going to be 40, 80, 120, or 160 hours. Like there was never a 2-hour project coming out of IT. It was always, the smallest thing you could get was 40.
Yeah.
Right. And so, no one could justify that, which is.
And this is why we have Power BI.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I mean, let's be honest. It was 3 hours of work and 37 hours of putting out fires for other people. It's just, it was tough. It was, I worked in IT for 2 years. It was tough. It was a tough environment. And, in Excel, you can just do these quick and dirty little things that I'm sure the IT department hates. They look at that and like, geez.
Yeah.
Seriously, you're solving that in Excel? It's like, yeah, well, I'm solving in Excel till you can have the time to actually design the right thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. So we had one question asked from Twitter to ask you, what percentage of Excel do you think you actually know how to use?
63%.
63.
Yeah, I started out when I first saw that question, I said 80. Like I'm sure it's 80, but then I started to think about the things I don't know. Like there's a whole bunch of, there's over 500 functions in Excel, and like all of those bond trading functions, I've written about them once to put them in a book, but if you put a gun to my head right now and ask me to solve those, I would be bad at that. I can write VBA, but I know I'm weak on TypeScript, the new language for automating Excel. There's a lot of stuff in here that I don't use that often. So I'm going with 63%.
Wow. MrExcel only knows 63%. You can imagine how big it is.
Yeah. And I think, unfortunately, there's so many people that think they know Excel. But, there's 5 ways to do everything in Excel. And one of those ways will take you 4 hours. And another way will take you 40 seconds. Right. So knowing which way is the right way to go is.
Awesome. So one more thing before we start going into more Excel. I know you're also a big fan of rockets. Like the one thing that I see on your Twitter is Excel and rockets.
Yeah, right. That's right.
How did that came to be?
Okay, so I was doing, this is going to be a crazy story. I did a seminar in Las Vegas, Nevada, and the hotel where the seminar was the place where the magicians Penn and Teller were. So I went
Mm.
to see the show, right? And after the show, they're selling books. Anytime if you run into me and you have a book to sell, I'm going to buy your book, right? I respect the people that took the time to write a book. I'm going to hand you $20 and buy your book. And so they had a book for sale. And on the flight home from Vegas, they said, something you have to do in your life is you have to go see a space shuttle launch. And the last one was going to happen. It was known as STS-135. And so we came down to see that space shuttle launch, all because of the Penn and Teller book, and met some people there who had friends who had gotten into the press site. Like they said, there's a lottery that you can get in and watch from 3 miles away. We were maybe 9 miles away. So next time I was on Twitter and I saw that lottery open up, I applied. I said, hey, I'm a tech channel. I got 10,000 Twitter followers, and they picked me. And so I got to watch from inside, which was really cool. And then I met people who actually do this for a hobby or a living. I don't know if anyone's making a living from writing about rockets, but I joined one of those organizations, and I had press credentials. I could go in and watch the rockets from up close and set cameras really close. And so that was great. And we have a lot of great photography that we did from that. But then I moved from a mile down that way to this house. And in this house, this is the MrExcel headquarters right here. Above me is a rooftop deck that was built to watch those rockets, right? So,
Wow.
I'm at an angle that's perfectly designed. Whoever built this house built the house to point to the 4 NASA pads that are happening. And so, like last night at 1 a.m, there was the big Artemis launch that's heading around the moon. And all of my old friends, had to be out there 6 hours ahead of time. It's late. They're trying to, it's when you should be sleeping. But now, 10 minutes before, I can have an alarm and just walk out on the rooftop deck and have a beautiful view of that launch. So this house has spoiled me. Like I won't go spend 2 hours and have it have the term is scrub. They say it's scrub. The launch gets canceled for any reason. They scrub the launch. So 5 minutes after a scrub, I can be back in bed, right? Those poor folks have to go pick up their cameras, and they're just out there the whole night. And then they waste the next night on the next attempt, and maybe the next night. So I loved being out there. I had a lot of great friends out there, but just being able to watch from the house is great. And
I can imagine.
Still get some cool photographs from here.
I've only been there once, and I didn't actually see any rocket launch, but I was very impressed with even just seeing the pads and seeing the rockets inside. And I can't imagine what it is like to actually see one launch.
Right. Yeah. And so let's go back to the previous house. That was 2015, September 1st, 2015. I drove down with the dogs. It was a 1,000-mile drive. My wife was already here. And I showed up at 2 a.m, and there was a 4 a.m. launch. Right. And she's like, are you going to go out for it? I'm like, no, I need to get some sleep. But we went out to the front porch of the house. Right. And so we watched the rocket go. And about a minute and a half afterwards, my garage door starts shaking. Right. So we're close enough that the sound from the rocket causes the house to shake, or at least the windows. And I looked at it and I said, look at this. We're so close. Our garage door is shaking. This is just awesome. So everyone here can just step out on their front porch or back porch, depending on which way your house is, and watch the rocket go. So it's just it's a cool thing, and the people around you, like next door, I have a launch director living next door, and at the old house, I had a guy who designed the rockets going back to the 60s. So
they have lots of cool stories.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's a cool place. When I was back in Akron, Ohio, there were old guys who worked on the old blimps and Zeppelins because that's where they were built, right? And so we kind of became blip fans up there. Well, now down here, we're just, different aircraft, much faster. It's
awesome.
So, yeah.
Cool. So, and I mean, of course, you're MrExcel. How closely are you following Power BI?
Oh, it's horrible. I am so bad at Power BI. In an 8-hour class, I can take data from Excel and load it into Power BI and create some amazing visuals. And that lasts maybe 12 to 15 minutes. And then I tell people that you need to go to a class or get a book on Power BI, because this is just scratching the surface, right? But unfortunately, that 12 minutes that I do over and over and over again is how much I know about Power BI.
Hmm.
You know, it's terrible. Like I know this is embarrassing. Here's what I know. The yellow might change to some other color, right? There's a new thing called metrics that people are very excited about. But I've never built one. And, so I hear the terms, but as far as the excitement of actually, if a new feature comes out in Excel, I'm playing it with right away and I'm making a video that day and, this is so great. But with Power BI, I'm like a child. I hardly know anything. I hope you don't cancel me.
No, definitely not. No, it's actually interesting, because I think there are much more and more synergies are starting to appear in Excel too. Like it's not like for example, connected to data sets,
right,
in Power BI from Excel. Like you're there in your pivot table, and you could connect the data that you've created in or someone else created in Power BI. So more and more synergy is definitely coming, and of course, we have the analysis service engine sitting in Excel, and we have Power Query engine sitting in Excel. So there are definitely close synergies. So I think there's
Power Query to me is like the most important thing to be in Excel, which is funny. It's not really an Excel feature when you get right down to it. It lives in Excel. It lives in Power BI, and so as I spend more time on Power Query in my Excel sessions than I do on Power BI.
Yeah. Well, it's transferable knowledge anyway, so that's good.
Right. Yeah.
All right. So now actually let's talk about Excel. I don't think like usually I have people over and we'll talk about what is the product we're going to talk about, but it's Excel, so we don't really have to talk about what it is. But for you, what do you see is the main use case for Excel? Like why is Excel? What are people using the most?
So for me, they're working in a company and that company has some system that they're running the company with, whether it's Oracle or SAP or whatever you're using. And that system has built-in reports and they need something that the built-in report can't do, right? So they find a way to get the data out of that system and down into Excel. And once you're in Excel, we can do any kind of ad hoc analysis you want, pivot tables, filtering, charting, so it's the ability to do those ad hoc analyses. And, having worked in IT, building those reports that people use, you can never predict every weird thing that's going to happen in the company, right? And so on any given Tuesday, someone's going to get a report and there's going to be some blip in the data. And there's going to be a question like, what caused this blip? And to be able to go pull the actual transactions and find out, that there's a store in San Bernardino, California that, they closed the street for construction, or the place down the street, closed, there was a strike and all of a sudden we're getting all the business. Those weird things that no one would ever think is going to happen. People have to be able to dive into the data and figure that out. And a good Excel analyst, using pivot tables and filtering and all kinds of things can get down into the data and figure those out. I mean, that's what I see a lot of people doing, just using it for an ad hoc reporting tool. And then sometimes you'll create an ad hoc report and the manager gives you one of these, hey, this is pretty cool. Can you do this every day? Right? Oh, and those used to drive me crazy, right? Can you do this every day? Mm-hmm. No. Well, I mean, I could, but that's what the IT department should be doing. Oh, well, they'll never do it. So now you get those little reports that you're
it takes
spending a little bit of time on.
It's actually funny.
But today with Power, go ahead.
Yeah, it's actually funny. Like my manager, he was in finance for 20 years, making Excel spreadsheets, and he fell in love with Power BI like 2010. So he's talking a lot about Power BI, but like he always tells these stories. Like you have to have like these presentations with like CFOs, and then you had like 15 to 20 Excel spreadsheets to figure out what's going on and what's like. It's great for once, but the repeatability of it is not great until you're gonna
Power Query solves that problem. That here's this amazing thing that I was able to do because I'm smarter in Excel than everyone else around me, right? But then I don't have to do that every day because Power Query memorizes the steps for me reliably, so much better than the macro recorder ever could do. And now it's just click this refresh button. And if you hate clicking the refresh button, go and set the settings that say when you open the workbook, just automatically refresh for me. It's just it solves so much of that drudgery of having to do the same thing over and over and over again.
Yeah. Makes sense. So I think we also kind of answered the next question, like who are the users? I mean, they are the...
Yeah. So, I'm biased because I'm tied into the accounting and audit groups. So almost all my people are managerial accountants. They work in a large company or they work in the audit department of a large company. And so for me, I always think about the accounting applications, finance, auditing, where they're just combing through a lot of data. I know every group uses Excel, right? But, I'm always thinking about it from an accounting point of view.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. And then, so I think probably one of the biggest questions that we see a lot happening, of course, in Power BI, and this kind of also relates to, like you were talking about analysts in Excel, but we also talk about analysts in Power BI. A lot of times we get people who, of course, are like, they grow up with Excel in their organization, and the first thing that they see in the Power BI report is, I want to export to Excel.
Yeah.
Why?
Right. No, that's because, well, we're really good at it, and we can like spin the basketball on our finger in Excel. We're just at home in Excel. And we can get down to the details of the data and discover those weird things using, this amazing tool set that we know and love in Excel. Yeah, I get it. I'll, even when Excel is not the right application, I'll go back to Excel just because I'm really good at Excel. And so, I get it. And it's great. Like, we know in any application, the most popular button is going to be paste, followed by copy. And then number 3 is export to spreadsheet. So, which is a beautiful thing to be. Like, you're the number 3 button in every application in the world.
Yeah.
That's cool.
But it also has a lot of, obviously it has a lot of downsides too, because
but it's no different than the old days of IT writing COBOL programs, and you need to do something special. And if it's a one-time thing, if it's literally a one-time thing, let's just do that in Excel rather than design a whole new dashboard in Power BI. Excel is great for this weird thing happened and we need to go figure out about it. It's never going to happen again. Don't spend 40 hours writing a report or less in Power BI, of course. Let us just pull the data down in Excel. We get the answer and we move on with our lives.
Yeah, but I think probably a lot of it has to do with the familiarity of the tool.
Yeah, right.
Like, if you've grown up with the Excel and the things that you can do there, like, you have to really learn something completely different.
Sure.
Like, they say the formulas are, some of the formulas are the same, which is true, but just the mentality, the way of the mental model of doing something in Excel is very different than it is in Power BI.
Right. Like, yes. And there's a few formulas that we have in Excel. There's actually a lot of formulas we have in Excel that aren't in Power BI, but just the ability to look in a data set, to look outside of the current row, right? So to be able to compare the current row to previous rows, there's things that, at least in my limited knowledge, I run into problems very quickly in Power Query, for example. And in Excel, I would be able to do that straight away. Like, I could always solve that in Excel. So it's when you get into the edge cases where I'm probably a lot better in Excel than I would be in.
By the way, we are getting an offset function.
In Power BI. That's good. Yeah.
So that will be really interesting, and also like windowing functions. So
tell me about those.
Well, they allow you to, like in SQL, they have windowing functions too that allow you to go back and forth in time easily.
Oh, yeah.
So,
okay.
So that will be really interesting. We're adding, because I think a lot of people have that same problem. Like, if you want to do year-over-year growth in Power BI, it's doable, but it's different than how you would think about it. Like, if you can just say, give me the previous cell, or give me the offset of -1.
Yeah.
That would be much, much easier.
Yeah. Right.
That makes sense. And then, so I think you already answered the question, but what is the most exciting feature of Excel in the last 5 years?
Okay, this is going to be funny. And the first, I'm going to give you 3 answers to this. And the first one, everyone's going to say, well, obviously, and that's dynamic arrays. The ability for one formula to return an entire array of answers without having to press Control Shift to enter. And we had array formulas before, but they were so difficult to figure out. So now just being able to use the new functions, the sort, filter, unique, sort by, but then they've added a lot of new ones. That just gives us a lot of power. But I'm going to show my jealousy here. They just came out with a great function called equal image, and I pass it an image URL, which is something that Power BI has been able to do since the beginning, right? You can have a field and mark it as an image URL and get that image in your report, right? And I always looked at that. It's like, oh, I'm so jealous of that. And now, we can do that in Excel, which gives us all kinds of ability to create. I realize as I'm saying this, to create beautiful dashboards in Excel that should have been done in Power BI, but I was too lazy to learn it, right? So now they're allowing me to stay entrenched in Excel even more. And as I hear myself say that, I'm cringing along with you. So, and then here's the new one. This is one that has not caught on yet, but it really is going to catch on. Back on the data tab in Excel is something called a data type. And they started out with the 2 currency or stocks and geography. And then they expanded it to a bunch of other things that came from Wolfram, and those were buggy. But the proof of concept with that is huge. As soon as they give us an easy way, they've given us 3 ways, but not an easy way yet, to take our own company data and to make a data type out of that company data. I always, my analogy here is if you go to the store and buy a picture frame, that picture frame always has a picture of someone else's family, right? Yeah. And no one would ever come home and put that picture frame on the desk with someone else's family picture there, which is essentially what the data types are doing today. It's someone else's data, right? You give me the ability to take my company data and create a data type out of it where I can just put in a part number and say, hey, this is a part number. And now I can get the description, the category, the price, the color, the cost, just using a straight formula. That's going to be amazing, right? And I know that there's 3 ways to do that, and Power BI gives us a way. I love the Power BI's data types give us the image URL, and from the same gallery as the other data types. But there's still a few things, that the Power BI data types don't do. And they came out with this new API that really, if you ignore the fact that I need a programmer who knows JavaScript to create the API for me, that seems to be closest to hitting all of my requirements for the data types. So I think that the data types eventually are going to catch on. It's one of those. The thing I love about Microsoft is they have this long view, right? They'll put a feature out in its V1 state, and you just kind of say, that's never going to catch on. But like in the V5 state, 10 years later, it's going to be a super feature. And I think that those data types, when they mature and all of a sudden people can take their own company data and create data types out of it, it's going to catch on. Like you.
I was expecting you to say Power Query.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
But
that's funny. Well, we already sort of talked about Power Query.
Yeah.
But you said in the last 5 years. So, that
is it older than that?
Well, Power Query debuted in Excel 2016, but it was available as the add-in for 2013 and 2010.
Data Explorer.
So somewhere between 13 and 16. Yeah, right. Yeah. I remember I downloaded it the first time. I'm like, there's nothing in here. This is like, the first couple of months of Power Query or Data Explorer were not that impressive to me. But over time, it's just amazing, right? I got a call from Mike Alexander the day that Unpivot came out, because Mike had this weird 10-minute trick of how to unpivot data using multiple consolidation range pivot tables, which I used to have to explain in my seminar, but I don't have to anymore because now we just have this button called Unpivot. And then the day that we got split column by delimiter to new rows, that was an amazing day. Those are things that are just so hard to do in Excel and just so easy in Power Query.
Yeah. So what is still missing in Excel in your mind?
Okay, I have 2,200 videos at YouTube, right? I have a video. Any Excel question you have, I have a video for it. And lots of times I can remember, right? So I get a question, it's like, oh yeah, just go watch this video. And so this new equal image function they give us, I want the same thing, but I want an equal video function. I want to be able to embed an instructional video right in the spreadsheet. And yeah, I can put the URL and hope they copy the URL and go out to YouTube and watch it. But if I could actually have that video pop up in a cell with a little 30-minute explainer video, that would be really, really cool. So, the equal video function, and then, just a whole bunch of things that you would think are ridiculous that I care about. But, there are things that just, like in the pivot table field list, I'm convinced the rows and columns icons are reversed, and I wish they would fix that, and just a whole bunch of really tiny little trivial things that most people probably never run into. But every time that I run into them, I'm like, this should be a couple lines of code. But the problem when you say a couple lines of code, it's now a couple lines of code in Windows and Mac and Excel Online and Excel for the iPhone and Excel for, it's not one product anymore. It's, it's a couple of lines of code across all these platforms. So it's harder to get things in.
All right, that makes sense. So I think one of the biggest problems that we've seen, at least in the past, and I'm not sure if that's still the case anymore, you know probably better than me, is that people seem to be stuck in time, especially with Excel. Like they still have Excel 2003 running on their desk and nothing changes. And
the beautiful, the beautiful thing is Microsoft 365 has done a great job of getting 40% of the room to be on the current version, which is amazing. Like it used to be, I would roll into town, I would have 100 people in the room, and I'd say, all right, how many of you are on the latest version of Excel? And no one. How many are you on one version ago? 20%. How many are you 2 versions ago? 60%. So it's like the IT department would wait until it had been out for 2 years, and then they would upgrade people. But now I'm getting 40% of the room who are instantly on the latest version. And that's a beautiful thing. And then if you're not on the latest version, then the odds are you're back in Excel 2010 or, somewhere long, long ago.
They're really old.
Okay. Yeah.
And then, so what about now you have to install the latest feature. I think we talked about this before we started the call, but imagine how many people are learning what's in the latest version of Excel. So it's not just a version, but also a mindset thing. Like you were talking about at the beginning, like you can see Power BI channels and books and things like this. They go like hotcakes, but Excel is just different.
Right. Because you already knew how to use the features that are in Excel. And I have a cool example when I'm talking about Power Query. If I get to talk about Power Query for an hour, which sometimes I do, I start with this example, and it's a joke from a 1980s era joke from a comedian named Stephen Wright. And Stephen had a joke that I love. He, in his deadpan, droll sense of humor, he says, yeah, look, someone broke into my apartment last night. They stole everything and replaced it with an exact duplicate. Right? It's just funny. And then his roommate walks in and he says, do you see this? And the roommate says, who are you? Here's what happened with Power Query. Power Query was not designed for the Excel people. Power Query was designed for the people who were forced to use Excel because of Power Pivot. All of these SQL Server Analysis Services people were forced back in Excel 2010 to come use Excel as a front end to get to Power Pivot. Yeah, right. And they're not 40 hours a week in Excel. And so Power Query was designed for those people and marketed to those people. And that's great. But the deal is Power Query is so powerful for the people using Excel. And I'll put up a spreadsheet where I have the data tab in Excel 2013 and the data tab in Excel 2016, right? And I said, if you're not looking at both of these at the same time, you won't realize that anything has changed, right? The words are almost the same. The icons are almost the same. But I say to the people, these icons in 2013 were so basic compared to what we get in Excel 2016, right? And because it had come out as an add-in between 2013 and 2016, it wasn't new anymore in Excel 2016. The Microsoft marketing people didn't push it. It looks the same. It's not in the home tab, it's back in the data tab. There's so many good reasons why people have no clue that this block that says get and transform data will change their life. And one of the best stories I have, I was invited to the same company 2 years in a row, just an hour away. And the first year I did my little, 25 minutes on Power Query in the afternoon. And then the second year, I get to that same point, and a guy in the back row stops me. And he said, so he works at this company, right? And he stops me. He says, look, I was here last year, and what you're going to see in the next 20 minutes is going to change your life. He said, I went from working 50 hours a week to working 25 hours a week because of what he's going to show you in the next 20 minutes. Right. And that makes everyone, stand up and take notice. Right. Yeah. So here's some poor guy that had been getting ugly data and manually fixing it, and learns how, using Power Query. You can become a Power Query pro in a couple of hours. Using Power Query, he just took all of these annoying things and made them go away, and no one knows it's there. I always start out like, how many of you have heard of Power Query? And I have sorry, for the CPE, continuing professional education, they make me ask 4 questions an hour, and they just want to see, the people who are answering, they're still paying attention on the Zoom call. And so I bait them with this question. I said, how many of you have used Power Query? A, I use it every day to change my life. B, I've heard of it, but I don't know what it is. C, I don't have it. You'll get 60% of the people who say, I don't have it. Right? And I'm like, no, you do have it, and you've had it for 6 years. You just don't realize that it's hiding back there on the data tab in this block that looks exactly like the useless block in Excel 2013. So that's it. If we can get everyone to use Power Query, that would change the world.
That's interesting. Yeah, but I think at least the good thing is it's available for people.
Yeah,
in a lot of cases, thanks to the 365. All right.
Yeah.
So one more question that we got from and this maybe a bit more confrontational question, but from Twitter, we see all these new functionalities, right? Power Query, dynamic arrays, new functions, but we haven't seen any updates to the chart engine in a long time.
Yeah, it's so frustrating, isn't it? Right. So we were stuck with the 73 charts, 73 chart types for the longest time. And then finally, the Excel team says they're going to start over, right? And they create this new charting engine, the Ivy charts, IVY. I don't know why they call it Ivy. That's their. So we get these new Ivy charts, but they're weird. Like, you can't just go in and format them the way you could format the old charts, right? And then there was like a reorg on the Excel team, and it feels like people just lost interest in Ivy, right? So now we have the old 73 and then the new 8 or 10 or something like that. And I was really super encouraged. A beta came out where we can embed Power BI custom visuals in Excel. Like, I was using it, I was showing it, I had a YouTube video. It even made it into one of my books. And then, 3 months later, like, yeah, it's harder than we thought. We're just going to put it on the back burner. I'm like, oh, that would have been amazing, because now you give me custom visuals from Power BI. I can do all kinds of things. And then I'm super encouraged. So it's a company I've never heard of, but maybe people in your space have heard of. I think they're out of Slovenia, the Zebra BI visuals. They just brought all of those to both Excel and PowerPoint. And when I first saw those, I was just blown away. Now, again, it might be old hat for the Power BI folks, but like for me, that was Christmas, because all of a sudden I get a bunch of new chart types that are better than what I have in Excel. Yeah. So I was jazzed about that. Like, I actually even took my data, like my book sales data, and ran it through Zebra BI just to, look and see what was going on. It was useful enough that it's like, oh yeah, I actually want to see my stuff.
Yeah, there's a bunch of really cool people out there building some amazing visualization and things. It's pretty cool that they were actually able to bring it to Office too.
Yeah, right. I wish that just anything that was out there for Power BI could come into Office. And the other thing we get, we're inheriting a lot of stuff from you. We're like the little kid who's inheriting cool features from Power BI. So on the Home tab, we have what is now called Analyze Data, which of course debuted in Power BI. That ask a question about your data thing. That's a beautiful feature that got handed down to us, and they improved it along the way, they claim. So that's awesome. I love the things that are rolling downhill, trickling downhill, making it into Excel, because you guys figured it out first. So That's cool.
But I think, I mean, in the defense of the Excel team too, like I was working on Excel 2013. I still have the ship it here. That means that I was actually part of the team in Excel 2013. So when we were doing Power Pivot integration, it is so hard to ship anything in Excel because you have this code base that has been around since the 80s. Like Bill Gates has code in there, you know?
He does.
He written code. And that's still on everyone's desk today. So it's super hard. And then to the same point you were saying is like, imagine that the new version of Excel would come out and we would do the same thing to them as we would do in Power BI. Like, oh, we changed the ribbon. What would happen?
Scream. Yeah, right. It would there would be a mass, you know, and that's one of the frustrating things to me when we talk about people using old versions of Excel. It's not the old versions of Excel that bother me. It's the people that just bought Office 2021. You know, like, why are we selling this? The paper that came out that said we're going to come out with Office 2021, they said it's for four specific edge cases. Like no human being should be using this. But Microsoft marketing doesn't get that. Like it's still, I go to the Microsoft store, they're selling it right next to the Microsoft 365. And I'm just like, oh, this is so bad. You're selling this to people and they have an obsolete version of Office and they won't get the new features. And I'm just like, oh, I'm so sorry that you bought this. And there even should be an amnesty program. There should be, you should go to Microsoft and say, all right, someone got fooled into buying this. Let me take that $400 I gave you and give me, 30 months of Office 365 or something.
Yeah, that's probably so people who just don't want to pay monthly fee.
Yeah, so. I get it. But why? Like the $10 a month for 5 computers, that's cheaper than paying $399 every 3 years.
Yeah. No, I have it too, and I have it installed on my own machine, and I have it installed on my daughter's machine for work, for her school work, and so I definitely use it all the time. All right, so what are the most common problems that you see in Excel? Like what do people come to you, or is it just random?
It's that they discover a way to solve their problem that is horrifically slow. They'll have a 4-hour solution to the problem, and they're super happy with their 4-hour solution.
So what do you mean with 4 hours? Is it like 4 hour? It takes them 4 hours to build it, or
4 hours. Here, I got this ugly data, and I need it to be this other way, and I'm going to sit here and repeat these 7 commands 450 times, right? And maybe I'll learn the keyboard shortcuts. Boom, 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 boom. I can do it fast. But then you come along and say, let me show you a 3-step process that's going to completely solve this in less than a minute. And the next time that you have this process, it'll either be a minute, or if I did it in Power Query, it'll be click the refresh button. So people just don't know what they don't know, right? They you open it up to this big grid and you find something in the home tab and you're like, oh, that's going to work. Like I can do insert row over and over and over and over again. There's, it's just finding the people who are managed to find some solution to their problem that is horrifically slow. And, they don't know any better. They don't have someone, right in the cube next door. Yeah, I guess we don't have anyone in the cube next door anymore, right? But, just being able to walk around and see what other people are doing in the accounting department or whatever department you're in, that was a great way to learn tricks in the old days. But, now with people working remotely, that probably doesn't happen as much anymore.
Yeah, I agree. It's actually an interesting challenge, I think, for a lot of young people starting.
Right. Yes. Yeah. I remember one big bank, huge bank, said, all right, we're getting a bunch of MBA students. They show up here on June 1st. I said, okay, great. When do you want me to show up? They said September 1st. I said, what? I said, yeah, we need them to realize they're drowning for a few months before you come in. Right. So that was great. All right. That's good. Let them struggle. Let them struggle in the real world. So, I don't know. I get that. I remember back, I was in college. I was adding up, I was just doing a simple little case study, just small, 40 rows of data. And one of the MBA students walks behind me. So he had worked in the real world for 2 years, and now he's coming back to get his MBA. And he slides to his top behind me. I don't remember the guy's name, but I can still picture him to this day. He's like, dude, that's never going to work in the real world. They will eat you alive if you try that method. Like, my method works just fine. He's like, yeah, it's not scalable. Right. And so he forced me to learn something new that day. Which at the time, I just remember being so annoyed with him because my way was going to work just fine. And by the way, I was 80% of the way through my way. So just let me finish this and I can, hit the bar.
Yeah.
Right. But, this luckily he was like, an older brother's just like, no, it's not a good practice. And it won't work. It won't work when you get to the real world. So, that was a good bit of coaching that on the day that it was happening to me, I wasn't enjoying that bit of coaching, but it's a better way. He was right. It was a better way. It was not scalable.
So that kind of reminds me. So let's say you're an Excel user watching this, or even a Power BI user watching this, and you want to learn more about Power BI or about actually using Excel, not just dabbling yourself, but actually using Excel. What are the things that you have to look into?
Okay. Everything, this doesn't help. Everything that was on the Excel 2003 data tab, which unfortunately has been moved. You need to understand the good ways to filter, how to filter by selection, the remove duplicates command, the pivot table command, which has been moved to the insert tab, using filter and remove duplicates and consolidate, data consolidate, and pivot table. You can take very ugly data and make that data look a lot better. The next thing you're going to need, I'm still going to say VLOOKUP, even though we should use XLOOKUP now. The biggest problem with Excel is it's not a database, and you have a little lookup table. It's so common that they put an item ID in the data and not the description or color or price that you need. And so being able to merge those two data sets, which is a simple join in Power BI, it's a simple join in Power Query, but just being able to knock out a VLOOKUP with your eyes closed, or an XLOOKUP, or an index and match, I don't care, whatever your poison is, just being able to do that access, to do access in Excel with a VLOOKUP, that for me, a lot of times it's the dividing line between being able to solve your problem and not being able to solve your problem. I once, as a manager, my first time as a manager, they let me hire an Excel analyst, and on the job posting that they posted down on the bulletin board, my requirements were, you can do VLOOKUP with your eyes closed, right? That it was just that, it was that important to me as a manager that the person knew VLOOKUP, because it would get you out of so many jams.
So what was the, when when people interviewed, you actually ask them to do it?
And I didn't make them do it, but I knew if you had the guts to apply for the job afterwards, then you VLOOKUP. I got this one guy, he was really good. After that, I started asking for people skills. But,
Oh. So. All right. So one more question. So what would you say, what would you recommend when people ask you, like, hey, should I use Excel or Power BI?
Okay. So I'm going to talk about my great friend, Jerry. Jerry runs a company with 100 stores. Jerry is a super techie guy, right? He has to have the latest of everything. And Jerry's nirvana would be to be able to get his reports on an iPad. Jerry just wants to live on an iPad, right? And Power BI is like, Microsoft made Power BI for guys like Jerry, because he can every day get his reports, click through the reports, never have to use a keyboard, and get all kinds of answers, including pictures in the dashboard. So when I think about Power BI, I'm picturing the high C-level executives who are, like Jerry, right? And he's super curious. I loved having Jerry as a client because he would never spec out the job the whole way. And I'm going to give you a baseball analogy, which may not play. He's like, I don't want you to hit a home run. Just get me to first base. And once you get me to first base, I'm going to have a whole bunch of new questions that I couldn't see because I'm looking at a different part of the field. So just get me 10% of the way there. And then I'm going to come back to you with a whole bunch of new things. Right. And so being able to drill down through your data is just perfect for Jerry. So when I think about Power BI, I'm thinking about those people who are trying to run their business, super curious about the data, but not someone who's going to sit down at a keyboard, right? And these touch screens and being able to drill down. Yeah. So for me, when you say Power BI, in my head, I picture Jerry, because you know that it's just he should be your client number one for Power BI. Like just the perfect. And it's funny. So remember, I said one of my favorite features is the image function. Jerry designed the image function 20 years ago in his Excel spreadsheets. That was his first call to me. He needed the image function. I said, Jerry, they did it. They just did it 20 years after you wanted it, right? But you know, here it is, right? And so, yeah, leading edge, really, really smart guy. And those, to me, are the perfect Power BI users. You know, just curious and needing to drill down through the data, but no one who's ever really wants to sit down and create a pivot table or write a VLOOKUP formula.
Yeah, but that's more the end users, so really, yeah. But which are a lot of them in the organization too.
Right.
So yeah, you would not create a Excel table for him.
Yeah, no. Well, I mean, we had to back in the day, but now, you know, yeah, we don't have to. So
yeah, that makes sense. So last question, and you've not been following Power BI that well, so maybe we won't be able to, but from what you've known about Power BI, what is the most exciting feature that you've seen in the last?
You're going to laugh, and I know that everyone who's watching this is going to hate this. The new color branding with teal. Yeah, that's gonna tell you in an instant if that book that you're looking at on the shelf is an old Power BI book or a new Power BI book. Like it's just defining a great new. If that book has teal on the cover, it's a new book. And then I guess seriously, the data cards, the data types, the ability to create data in Power BI that I can use in Excel as a data type, that for me, for one very specific reason, I'm really jazzed about that new feature. Other than that, though, I just don't know enough to answer intelligently.
You probably have some videos around that, no?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
I'll put them.
And there's actually, I have a triad of videos that shows the Power Query way to do it, which falls short in so many ways. The Power BI way to do it, which solves a lot of my problems, and then the API, which unfortunately I don't know JavaScript well enough to create it myself. So if we just find a way to merge that Power BI and the API together, to like every box would be checked if you could merge those somehow.
Hopefully some PM will watch this and
yeah,
we should do it.
Yeah, and everything that we want is going to happen. It's just going to happen in some time frame, 5 years from now or 4 years from now, right? They'll get to it. So I used to be a little, I want to say curmudgeonly, like, oh, why isn't it doing it today? You just have to have this long view. They're going to get to it, right? The Excel team is as frustrated as I am with the things that aren't happening, but it just takes a while to get things in there. So,
yeah, I mean, we talk about this a lot here in the show too. We have some of the PMs responsible for some of the features. It is just mind-boggling what it takes to ship something at the scale of Microsoft. And especially when you talk about Excel, like how many languages is it available in? Like how many businesses run on Excel? So any change that you make anywhere, like, can you imagine, like, for example, some people say, oh, why isn't the pivot table using DAX instead of MDX? Oh my God. I think changing that is like open heart surgery, and hoping and replacing that heart with some artificial heart or like something very, very complicated.
And for a bunch of patients at the same time who are all different, right? And the problem you have to worry about is, so 750 million people use Excel. Even if 0.1% have figured out some weird way to use Excel in a way that no one imagined they would, which happens all the time.
Oh yeah.
You get these people doing things that the Excel team never dreamt that people would be doing in Excel. And all of a sudden it breaks, right? You do this new thing and it breaks it for 0.1%. That's a stadium full of people who are all of a sudden hacked off because their thing that they do all the time. And for them, of course, that's what Excel was made for. It's not working anymore. So it's a tough thing, and
But
I'm on the beta channel. You'll see things that break, right? And for me, it was great because I was doing the same 8-hour seminar over and over and over again. So when something went bad, I would know. And it's like, oh, that broke because we were working over here in this other part of Excel, like nothing to do with this. Some change over here broke this thing over here. It's just a massively complicated code base. I don't envy the people on the Excel team and how complicated the development process has to be.
But there are some developers who've been there for a long time.
And there's some code. So this is a story from my friend Rob Colley, right, who was on the Excel team and then on the Power Pivot team. He says, there's some developers, some bits of that code, like the developers retired, but they'll still, drive a dump truck full of cash over to the guy's driveway just to get him to come back in to touch this 30-year-old code again. It's like, oh yeah, that is a tough situation to be in.
Yeah, I can imagine. Okay, so after the set was the last question, but one more came to mind. What do you see is where is it going with Excel? Like, are we going to expect anything? Like,
I think that Excel is going to continue to evolve. If we're lucky, they're going to make Power Query more obvious. If we're lucky, like right now, they're under insert pivot table, I now have from Power BI, right? So now I can actually have something in Excel that I can open and discover there's a thing called Power BI. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't it be great if we had a tab that was just called Power BI, right? And like it was integrated to the point where I could, have buttons that said export to Power BI, or, just make the Excel people aware that there's a whole other world out there. And, to bring those two worlds closer together. So my stat that I quoted is 750 million installs of Excel, which is a huge number. Now I understand, like for me, I have 6 of them, right? So it's not 750 million people, but like, so is there a publicly available number of how many people are using Power BI? If you ever get those two numbers on par, wow. Just think how powerful that would be.
Of course, that's the dream. But I know, I don't know if you've seen, but we're already getting one step closer because Power BI Desktop will be installed by default with M365.
Perfect. Right. That.
So now all of a sudden,
right, yeah.
Power BI Desktop will show up with everyone.
Yes. Yeah. And they open it up and there's that great splash screen that just invites people to jump in. That's a great thing right there. You look at some of the products that came out over the years, like Microsoft OneNote, great little product, but not part of the standard Office. So no one ever knew it existed.
Yeah.
So, right. Yeah.
All
so
right.
That's good.
Bill, thank you so much for your time. It was great to have you. Great to talk about Excel.
Yes. Thanks for inviting me. I really appreciate it. So hopefully, and next episode, we'll be back to someone who really knows about Power BI, right? So
actually, no. I actually do a lot of things that for people where I can learn and we can all learn. Like last week, I had something about Azure Data Explorer, which again, something I don't know much about, but it's really cool tech and really cool features. So try to learn, but all is in the data space. That's for sure.
Oh, that's great. That's good. Excellent.
All right. Thanks. Thank you, Bill. And I'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone. Sounds great. Thanks.
And that concludes another episode of Kasper On BI. I hope you've enjoyed it. I liked the discussion. I've learned some things. I actually am going to play around with a bit more with Excel, just to see like dynamic arrays. I never played with it. The data types, I've seen Chris Webb blog about it, so I'll figure that out too. I will put descriptions, links in the description below. And next time we'll have Alberto here talk about best practices on debugging DAX. So that will be very exciting too. So thank you for your time. If you liked it, hit the like button. If you want to hear more, hit the subscribe button. And with that, thank you for your time.